Hello, this is our second video in our comma series, and the main issue with our comma rules today is going to be using commas with introductory words and phrases and clauses, and then also using commas for non-essential information. Okay? So basically, whenever a sentence begins with an introductory word or a phrase or even a clause, that word or phrase or clause is usually separated from the rest of the sentence with a comma, because it's not really necessary information, it's kind of attention-getting information. So here's some examples of what we mean by that. Hey, listen to the great idea I have about our project. Now, it would still be a sentence if I just said, listen to the great idea I have about our project, and the word hey is just kind of an introductory word. It kind of grabs your attention. So it's not required information for the sentence, and so it sets apart with a comma. An introductory phrase could look like this. To save money, comma, we are packing our lunch instead of eating out. This is doing the same function. It's introducing this sentence. So it's not actually part of the main idea of this sentence, and it sets off with a comma. And you can even do that with a whole clause. When Devin arrived, comma, we needed more room at the table. You should recognize that as being a dependent clause. Very good. Now, there is one thing we have to review in talking about prepositional phrases. Most of the time, these prepositional phrases that are introductory phrases will also be set apart with a comma. But if the prepositional phrase is only 2 words long, then we don't need a comma. It's not exactly necessary. In August, we go to the beach. Now that is an introductory phrase, and we maybe could set it off with commas, but because it's such a short one, most of the time we don't. Okay? So if the prepositional phrase has only 2 words, it's not entirely mandatory that we set it off with commas. Now, the next rule is about using commas to separate parenthetical expressions. Now, what parenthetical expressions means, basically, is that that word or that phrase is not essential to the meaning of the sentence. It's like added information. And when you have that, it almost always is set apart by a comma. So in these examples, hopefully that'll clear it up a little bit. Sit down, Brooke, while I explain the lesson. It would still make sense if I covered Brooke and just said, sit down while I explain the lesson. And Brooke is just kind of added information to say who we're talking about. So because that can be taken out or covered up, it's extra. And so we set it apart by commas on both sides. Some adverbs do the same thing. The beach, therefore, is accessible. Again, I could cover it up and say the beach is accessible, and so it's not required, so I need to set it off in commas. I understand your actions, of course. Okay? A lot of times we put some of that clarifying or directing information at the end of the sentence, and that needs to be set off with 1 comma as well. The problem is yours, not mine. And that really just sounds like it needs a comma. When I say that out loud, you hear the pause in my voice. The problem is yours, not mine. You can hear that comma in my voice. Okay, some other examples of essential versus non-essential. If the information in a sentence is required, it needs to be in there to really understand the sentence, for it to make sense at all, then you would not put it apart with commas. But if the information is non-essential, then you would put commas. Okay? The team, the Hurricanes, prepared for the parade. Okay? Now that is essential information. The Hurricanes here, I wouldn't know who you're talking about if I didn't have the Hurricanes. Okay? So that wouldn't make sense without the Hurricanes in there. So I need that information in there, so there's no comma. The Hurricanes, comma, the winning team, comma, prepared for the parade. Now I could cover up the winning team and say the Hurricanes prepared for the parade, and that would still make sense. Okay? This winning team information is not really essential. It's good information, and it tells us more about the Hurricanes, but we don't absolutely have to have it. And because of that, we put it apart by commas. Just a couple of other examples of that with different types of phrases and then an adjective clause. Again, if it's essential, you do not have to have a comma. If it's not essential, you do. Let's look at these. The man standing in the room is my teacher. Okay? In the room is my phrase right there. The man standing is my teacher. Well, that kind of, it seems like there's something missing there if I don't have in the room. That's kind of required information there. So the man standing in the room is my teacher. But my teacher standing in the room asked us to be seated. Now, I've only really just changed the order of that a little bit, but I've changed it in a way that standing in the room is now non-essential information. my teacher asked us to be seated. Well, that would still make sense, and it would be a complete thought. And then standing in the room kind of gives us more information about the teacher, like an adjective would, but it's not required information. Same thing with an adjective clause. It's going to do the same thing, except it's going to be a whole clause instead of just a phrase. B and her sister wanted a dog that could play ball with the team, or with them, sorry. B and her sister wanted a dog that could play ball with them. That could play ball with them is required information. It's essential to understanding like what kind of dog she wanted, or the type of dog she wanted. So we wouldn't separate that with a comma right there, even though it may seem like we should, because that's where the clause starts. B and her sister are thrilled with their new dog, comma, which likes to play ball. And those seem really similar, so I can understand why that might be a little bit confusing. But the way we've wrote it in this sentence, which likes to play ball, is an adjective clause that describes the dog. And the sentence would still make sense without it. Okay? B and her sister are thrilled with their new dog. That would be a complete thought. Now this gives us more information about the dog, but because it's not essential to understanding the meaning of the sentence, we set it off by commas. Okay? We'll practice that a lot this week, so I'll see you soon.